we were at the point where we were talking in this chapter with the endocrine system and the hormones, all these hormones that we know of that are moving around in the body, and we have talked about which ones they are, how they get, how they get formed, that sort of thing. And we were looking at some of the other areas of the body that help or do some type of hormonal function, but they're definitely parts of other systems. So we looked at like the skin, the kidneys, that sort of thing. We left off on this slide right here, adipose tissue, osseous tissue, placenta. The next part for the chapter, it's going to move us into the actions of these hormones. Okay, a couple of things for us to think about. These hormones, we're going to see that the hypothalamus is involved. We're going to have our pituitary gland, the anterior and the posterior. So if we go back and think about that hypothalamus, we think about that pituitary gland that's coming off of it, where we've got an anterior and a posterior with only two hormones in the posterior. We have the hypothalamic hormones. We have our anterior that has, does anybody remember how many?
6.
7, maybe? Anyway.
6.
6? Okay. Okay. So, what I'm trying to get to, do you guys remember how we have the, since the posterior is neural tissue and the anterior is cellular, that to get information to my anterior, we work by way of that portal system. In other words, where we've got blood, okay? On the posterior, we work by way of those neurons. Is everybody with me? Now, once we get this production and once we get the production, we're going to find that with our target tissues, we are going to be dependent on our bloodstream for transporting a lot of these chemicals. And then when we get to our target tissue, we're going to be depending on that target cell to have receptors. And hopefully those receptors can accept the chemical, i.e. the hormone. Once that takes place, let's think for a second about the structure of our cells. The structure of our cells, hopefully you guys remember, we have a nucleus, yes? And in that nucleus is our DNA, right? How many strands do we have of this in our somatic cells? How many molecules of DNA exist in the nucleus of our somatic cells as a human? Well, there are 23 pairs. So there are 46 molecules. Now, if we think about that, okay, meaning we have the 46 chromosomes, the molecules of DNA, all right? A DNA strand y'all okay if I erase this?
Yeah.
All right, so now if we go back to thinking about a DNA strand are all these bases. A's, T's, G's, C's. Is that correct? And of that strand of DNA, that is all these bases, A's, T's, G's, C's, A's, T's, G's, C's, A's, T's, G's, C's, okay? Located along that strand are our genes. So if we have 46 of those molecules, and on a DNA strand, which are all different lengths, okay? Have y'all ever seen the information about the base pairs? About chromosome 1 having 1 million, chromosome 2, 2 million, chromosome 3. Have you ever seen that information of the Human Genome Project? Okay, well, chromosomes are different lengths, meaning the different base pairs. And roughly, how many genes do the 46 chromosomes hold? About how many genes are in the human population? Anybody know? Didn't learn that in part 1? About 50,000 in the human population. Do you contain or have all 50,000? Chances are no. Okay? But of those genes, we all have a huge percentage that are the same. Right? Is a gene coding for a certain protein different between all of us?
Yeah.
No, it's the same. If I have, for example, the gene for insulin, which would be active in my pancreatic cells, is the code for my insulin different from the code for your insulin? No, it's the same. What makes us different? Do you want me to?
Physical traits.
And what codes for those?
Our parents.
Well, we definitely see 23 from mom, 23 from dad, and the offspring to make the 46, okay? The traits that really make you you are called the non-coding DNA. Even though it's coding, like for example, do we have 2 eyebrows or 1? Okay, yes, okay, but a lot of the stuff that's individual just to you would be considered non-coding. So now, do you think that on one of those DNA strands, we have more than 1 gene? Yes, because that DNA strand, say for chromosome 1, could contain 5,000 genes. Is everybody with me? Okay, so we could have gene after gene after gene on that DNA strand. It becomes the job of that gene to make the cells do something. Because the only thing, remember, that a cell can produce is the proteins, the amino acid strings, right? Okay, so when a hormone gets produced, its activity, what do you think in the cell that this little hormone, this chemical that's moving around in the blood, what do you think it's going to act on in the cell?
Is it acting on like the DNA and the nucleus?
Well, it would act directly upon, it can act directly upon the gene on the DNA in the nucleus. But another way that these chemicals can act, don't forget that we have like our endoplasmic reticulum, we have our Golgi apparatus, all right? Because the DNA, the gene, coded for this string of amino acids that gets to leave and go out to the endoplasmic reticulum, well, goes out of the nucleus. It gets attached to by ribosomes, and the end product is a protein. Does everybody remember that? If it is a protein that leaves the cell, for example, insulin in a pancreas cell, okay? That means the gene that codes for insulin needs to be open and available in the nucleus so that we can go through transcription and translation so that we can make that vesicle. Does everybody remember that? All right, that vesicle that will hold the protein. So that would have to go to my endoplasmic reticulum, to my Golgi apparatus, make its way to the plasma membrane, and get spit out of the cell. Because I need that insulin to move through my bloodstream. Is that correct? So, some of our products are made to leave the cell, but sometimes we create in our cell a product that stays in the cell. For example, it might need to make more lysosomes. Do lysosomes leave the cell? They're going to stay in the cell. Does that make sense?
This isn't the same process as like a second messenger. So
We're going to get to that, because if the activity is to affect or cause it to stop it, the product, the hormone has to cause that to take place. So the hormone can act either directly on a gene on the DNA in the nucleus of the cell, or the action can happen to the product before